Hi, Francesca. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. I hope you're doing well.
Hi, that's great to be talking to you. And yes, I'm doing fine in Rome in lockdown since 2 months.
Must have been a very hard time to go through, and thanks, especially during these circumstances, that you made time to be part of Republica this year.
No,
Um,
it's great, and I think it's going to be an experiment to see Republic unfolding this year.
Yes, we're also excited about this new format that we're taking, and I hope that next year for our anniversary we can sit together on stage and have a longer conversation. But I'm glad that we can speak today. I was very curious to find out how things have moved on from you. The Decode project, which was really a visionary project in Europe, to try to turn around the paradigm of the narratives we've been listening to about smart cities to smart citizens. And now that the project's ended, I would love to hear some reflections from you. What do you think were the biggest achievements that you made and like the takeaways from Decode now?
Yes. So Decode didn't really end. It ended as a project, as a funded project, where the European Commission has been one of the key funders. But I think Decode made, for us, it was a huge experiment, pan-European, on how we can reclaim back democratic governance of data and how we can really build data sovereignty in the way we develop our critical infrastructures, our critical digital infrastructures. And we had 3 years to build decentralized, privacy enhancing and rights preserving data infrastructure that enable citizens in Barcelona and Amsterdam to use digital infrastructure to improve their cities for the better, for a more participatory democracy, to use data to tackle climate change and for a sustainable mobility, and also really to think about the implication of using data and artificial intelligence in cities. So Decode is a really starting point to think about a future where we reclaim public infrastructure and data for the public interest. And I think what I really liked about this project is that not only we brought forward a very important and I think critical conversation for the future of digital Europe, which has a high political relevance, because who own the data and the artificial intelligence that's built with that data in the future will determine the rules of the game. And also this will have strong implication in our economy, in how government work, and in society. But I think also this big conversation in the Decode project really landed on practical application and experimentations in cities. So we deployed actual pilots engaging thousands of citizens in two of the biggest smart cities in Europe. And as you said, we kind of turned around the concept of the smart city from a top-down, tech-driven approach to a bottom-up, people-centric and democratic approach. And then we have actual results. So it's tangible. So you can see how it works, what it didn't work, because of course it's experimental. We learned a lot in the process. And I think now we have real learnings and actual technologies and learning from pilots. And at the moment we are pushing this project in a wider platform where other cities are able to learn from what we've been doing. And actually we have a strong backing from the UN, which is the UN habitat that deals with cities, to bring forward this data sovereignty and people-centric approach to smart cities more globally.
I'm very excited to hear about that. So I know that Decode produced a lot of great open source products that are out there and are available, and potentially cities can take them up. And I'm trying to have this conversation here with the city of Berlin as well. So how is this process going to try to bring other cities on board and really work with the results of Decode?
Yes, that's a great question, because I think we're going to have to do it together, meaning that I think this kind of changes can only happen if we mobilize a coalition that involves civil societies, the innovators, technologies, citizens themselves, and broader organizations in the cities, because these approaches have to be pushed somehow from the bottom up, and then only then policymakers are going to be able to change a bit the way they do technology policy in the city. So I think we have to do it together. But let me tell you that the Decode project not only released some open source tools, which are basically decentralized cryptographic protocols, but also decentralized technology, including distributed ledgers that enable citizens to decide what data they want to keep private, what data they want to share, with whom, and on what terms they want to share this data. But I think we also managed to create actual policies that can be replicated by other cities. One, for example, is how we change procurement rules when it comes to technology. So in the city of Barcelona, we created what we call data sovereignty clauses that we applied in public procurement processes, so that the city of Barcelona was able to get back in machine-readable format all the data that were used in their digital services. Could be a telephone service, or mobility, electric bicycle, or the waste management service, any kind of services. The data had to be given back to the city in machine-readable format, and that data was declared a public good. I think this idea of having data as a public infrastructure, like water, like electricity, like the air we breathe, and then having citizens really to be in control of this data, is the new paradigm that we've been putting forward with Decode. So it's not only big corporations owning the data, like the GAFA or the Chinese equivalent, versus public data as in terms of government controlled data, but we've been putting forward a third option, which is a civic pact on data, meaning why don't we get citizens to be more in control of the data, and through cryptography and privacy enhancing technology enable them to really be more in control, but at the same time to share. Because if you know that your privacy and your rights are preserved, you are more prone to share this data, and then this data can be turned into a data commons, and it can be used to tackle, energy transition, or the fight against climate change, better mobility, healthcare, and so on. So these policies actually are now in a platform that the UN Habitat is using to promote a new program that we just launched in Abu Dhabi before the coronavirus exploded, which is called People-Centered Smart Cities. And maybe we can talk about that, because we want these policies to be reused, adapted, changed by other cities in Europe, but globally, really.
Yes, you can tell me how I can sign up Berlin in a minute to this initiative. I would love to ask you a little bit more about the data commons. Firstly, let me just quickly say that I really felt everything you were saying the last time I was in Barcelona, which is just a couple of months ago now. But this idea that there are services, especially mobility services and other public services being created for citizens, used by citizens, and this data sharing is actually visible in the city, which I thought was quite exciting. And it's something that I would love to see here as well. I think it really helps if citizens feel and see the benefits of these kind of digital infrastructures take place in their cities. But I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the idea of the data commons, because I feel that recently the idea of open data and the data commons, as we have understood it perhaps in the recent years, has come under critique. I spoke to somebody who, for instance, manages open data sets in Estonia for the capital city, and he was saying that he's made over the years the experience that these open data approaches really profit startups and capitalist enterprises, basically, more than non-commercial enterprises. And this idea that we need more than just a complete open data approach, but the sort of tiered access approach or community stewardship approach is being discussed more and more. What do you think about such approaches?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. I think at the beginning, the open data movement was really important to change the mindset and the kind of cultural organizations inside the public sector. I think this is a point I like to stress very much because we think that digitization or digital transformation is about technology, but it's not. It's about really training people, it's about a cultural shift, it's about an organizational change. And I think the open data movement contributed to that change. I mean, meaning that sharing informational resources and digital assets, intellectual property, software, data, can be very important for public administration internally, but also if we are able to release this data for the city and the city stakeholders, then we can build new application and new services on top of it. But as you said, there are two issues there. On one side, how do we make sure that we create public value so that we don't release the data and then, well, the actual companies that can take advantage of this data are the ones that already have a lot of data, and it's easier for them to build on top of this data and then just take all the public data. On the other side, we want to keep privacy. So we want to preserve privacy, security, and openness, which are not contradicting. I think you can have openness, privacy, and security at the same time. And so we want to share data as much as possible, but at the same time, keeping our fundamental rights and our right to privacy really strong. And then a tier approach enable you as a city to set the rules, so your policies. So you can say, for instance, I want to put this open data for free for civil society, for citizens, for data journalists, but also for startups, so that I can incentivize the local ecosystem to build on top of public data. But then I want to control who accesses the data, because if you are Uber or Google or a big company and you want to access transport data, I need to set the rules because I want to get a public return out of that sharing of this digital resource. And it's possible to do that. So I think now this is a policy that starts to get really important for cities. And I think you can do it not only incentivizing more markets, but also incentivizing other forms of social organization or solidarity-based economies that can be fostered and expanded through the use of data, for instance, in cities. So we have a lot of experiments going on. And then I want to also stress the fact that, for instance, for us in Barcelona, a core issue of these policies has been citizens' empowerment. Like we have done, and also the Decode project, one of the main applications for us is the integration of Decode with Decide in Barcelona. Decide in Barcelona is a participatory democracy free software platform that has been used by so many citizens, 400,000 citizens in Barcelona. 70% of the proposals, the action plan of the city of Barcelona came from citizens directly. And they continuously use this platform to interact with the city administration. So if you put citizens at the centers, you are not only changing the technology policy, you're actually changing the way that citizens and public administration are communicating. You are basically changing the way that decision making happens in the city, and you're trying to devolve more power to the citizens. I think this has been the fundamental aspect of our policies.
And I think it's really exciting to see how successful that was in Decode, because it's often this point where people are really scared about inviting real participation and opening up that door. But you showed with your process that it is quite possible to have these participatory policy designs take place with citizens really taking control. And I think that should be encouraging for policymakers in cities across the world. What was also interesting for me to see is how you used the online platforms that you created, but also the physical infrastructure of the city. So integrating makerspaces and like the Fab Lab Barcelona as a physical nexus point also for citizens to come in and interact.
Yes, there is no digital participation only. Digital participation is always a hybrid between online interaction and real interaction in actual physical spaces and neighborhoods in the city. And you mentioned the makerspaces, and the makerspaces for us are a laboratory to manufacture the future of the city, to prototype a sustainable and democratic future. We've been working with them a lot, and one of the pilots of the Decode project was done in collaboration collaboration with the Fab Lab Barcelona and Ideas for Change. And it was about working with citizens groups that were producing sensor data to measure environmental pollution and to measure noise in the city. And we've been working with really a low-tech kit based on Arduino and the sensors that people were putting in their home to measure pollution and to measure other environmental data, and integrating this citizen-produced data with our Internet of Things infrastructure, and then working together with the citizens groups and the community to show that basically when you look at the data, the data is a tool to actually enable civic participation and the better decisions about what kind of problems you want to solve in the city. For instance, tackling CO2 emissions and really make it better for the citizens in a neighborhood. So I think this kind of approaches can be scaled up. So I think one of the really important learnings from me is now we have to make these approaches mainstream. We want to really bring all this energy that comes from the maker movement, from the civic tech groups, from the startups, from the ecosystem of the city into a broader city platform, and then link up the different cities that are doing this kind of experiments and really elevating ideas such as data trust or data commons to be a model for Europe. I think if we take it to the next step, this would be what I really want to see. I want to see data trust and data commons become a model for governance of a more democratic digital society.
I also want to see this. There's no panel with politicians that goes by these days in Germany, at least, where they are not speaking about this third European model, something to counterbalance the surveillance economy of the US and something to counterbalance the state surveillance of China. But this vision is lacking. And I very often then try to hold up a flag for the work that you've been doing, because I think we have these visions. They're there. They're with you and the people who created these projects and all of our communities that have been advocating this human rights-based path in the last years. So I would also really like this to become our European model and our sort of digital vision for the future. And you spoke a little bit now about also the infrastructural role of makerspaces. Especially now in these times we're living in, I run a network of different makerspaces across the world, and most of them become humanitarian support places and places where they are creating desperately needed medical equipment. So the role that citizens have in such emergency response actions is also becoming so apparent and important. How do you think we can maintain some of these citizen engagement processes you've set up also in crisis times?
Yes, I think one really key issue that you mentioned is the fact that all these initiatives really have an infrastructuring role. They're providing this fundamental essential digital infrastructure, which is democratic, which is accountable, which is public, on top of which we can build all these new initiatives. So it's a really important role, and we need to nourish it, and we need to make sure that it has investments, attention, resources, but also that we are able to make it more sustainable in time. So as you said, I was also really impressed by the role of the makerspaces, the makers, but also, really the innovators during the emergency. They came up with, they're sharing data that is helping the scientific research to tackle COVID. They created 3D printed masks and ventilators. They are really sharing knowledge and putting their infrastructure at the service of our society. And I think it's this kind of solidarity-driven approach that we need, and we're going to need even more now that we are restarting, that we are exiting from this emergency phase, and we need to restart. So we need to get citizens on board, and we really need this kind of infrastructure. So what I will say is that of course, we need to fund this initiative. We need to take them into account as part of the main, of the main public spaces, and then make sure that they have more investments. But beyond that, I think we want to be very serious in taking their policy, their initiative as really core and central to the way that we are developing our policies, especially in cities.
Yep. So maybe closing up, then let's get concrete. What are the next steps? Where do I sign up Berlin for this UN Habitat Initiative?
Yeah. So first of all, as you know, probably, Decode also gave us the opportunity when I was the city of Barcelona, together with Amsterdam and New York, we started the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. So we used our experiments within the Decode context to actually create a much broader coalition of cities. Now there are 60 cities that are part of this coalition. It is backed by UN Habitat, by the USCLG, which is the biggest city organization globally, Eurocities and Metropolis. And basically these cities are saying, okay, digitalization is going to be really important in the future, but we want to do it putting people first and their fundamental rights and liberties first. So they have a declaration with some common points. I mean, these include the right to information self-determination, the right to privacy, participatory democracy, connectivity as a basic human right. And then they are sharing a roadmap. So they're coming together, sharing projects, sharing codes, sharing policies, and then try to move forward. I think really that we are going to have to align much more digital technology with our core challenges that we are facing in society. First of all, the green transition and the Green New Deal, but then also investing more in healthcare, in essential services. I mean, we need the technological revolution to tackle our fundamental challenges, our social and environmental challenges, because we want to have more social and environmental sustainability. So I think this is where we should be going. UN Habitat launched the People-Centered Smart City program. So now we have a platform which is global, which is based on the learning from the Barcelona experiment and from the coalition, Digital Coalition for Digital Rights. And as part of this, we have a toolkit for ethical digital standards, where basically we want to build on top of this work. So how we can create data commons and data trust, how we can have more sovereignty and democratic control over digital infrastructure and data, what kind of policies we can put forward to basically scale up, you know, to help maker spaces to scale up this initiative globally. So I think basically we're going to have to work to make sure that this newly created platform can really have concrete projects. So we want cities not only to commit to the declaration, but also to be very serious about investing resources and initiating this kind of people first digital city projects. So I think, well, the German chapter obviously should be the next step, together with the city of Berlin, the city of Hamburg, and many other cities that are doing really excellent work in this space.
I very much look forward to hopefully being a part of that process and populating that platform with projects coming from here, but also around the world, and would really like to thank you again for the amazing work we're doing and for taking the time for speaking to me today.
Thank you so much to Republica and to Geraldine.
Have all the best and for the next weeks, and take care.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.